Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about the game Nothing Personal. I believe this came out in 2013. I don't remember exactly when I acquired it, but it was a long time ago, so probably close to around that time. I know there's a new revised version of this out um, that came out later, maybe a few years ago. I don't know the differences in the version. This is the only version I've played. So I'm going to do a how to set up a play on this one. So let's get started with how to set up. Well, no surprise, the first thing you'll do is place the play board in the middle of the play area within reach of all players. Each player then chooses a player board, the matching meeple, the 25 matching influence markers, and $5. So I've done that. For a 3-player game that I'm setting up for, we've got the Della Rosa, Fiduciani, and Famiglia Minuetto. And that's all the Italian mobster accent I'll be doing. But anyway, I've got it set up for 3 players. You then take the gangster card with Killer Mac Vito on that, and he'll be placed up here on the board on the 9th position, the capo. You'll then shuffle your remaining gangster cards. You then deal 1 face up into the 8th position underboss, 1 into the counselor, 1 into the enforcer, and 1 into the racketeer. Now, when dealing these cards out, if you get a type of gangster that has already been revealed in one of the other spots, like here I got a hitman and I've already dealt a hitman, so you want to have at least one of each type. So since I got another hitman, I discard that and continue to draw until I get a type that has not been revealed. This one, gambler and thug, I've already got a gambler and a thug, so discard that one, draw another one. Okay, con man, so that's good. So I've got a gambler, that's that icon, a hitman is that icon, thug is that icon, and con man is that icon. So when you're dealing those 4 cards out, you always want to have a different type. If you draw one that is of one of the types that's already been revealed, you discard it and draw another until you get at least 4 different types there. Then you'll reshuffle the gangster deck, including the cards you discarded while dealing those out. After you've reshuffled, you then finish dealing the remaining spaces, and then it doesn't matter which ones you get. So put 1 on the bean counter, 1 on the first guy, 1 on the second guy, 1 on the third guy, and then the 3 associates. So 1, 2, and 3. The remainder of the deck is just placed on the gangster spot here on the board. You then shuffle your influence cards and deal 4 to each player. Alright, so I've shuffled and dealt 4 to each of my players. Then place the remainder of the deck on the influence spot on the board. Take 1 checkmark token and place it on the commission spot of the phase track, and just put the remaining 4 checkmark tokens near the board. Then you take each player's scoring meeple and place it on the 0 or rifiuti space of the board. And I guess I'll just put them like that. You then place the dice, the money, the neutral influence tokens, blackmail tokens, Omerta tokens, just all somewhere near the board. You then give the capo ring to whichever player that looks most like a mobster, or the rules state if nobody can agree on that, the first player to give an accurate quote from a gangster movie takes the ring, or whatever method you want to choose to be first player. So I'm going to make my player right here first player, so they will take the capo ring. Then starting with the first player and continuing clockwise, each player will place one influence on a gangster on the board, and then we'll continue to do that until each player has placed 3 influence out. You can place the influence all on one gangster, or you can spread it across multiple gangsters. If any player gains control of the capo while doing this, and we'll talk more about controlling a gangster later, but it's basically whoever has the most influence on there. So if another player ends up putting more influence on the capo, then they would take the ring from the first player. But that would not change who's the first player for the current phase. So anyway, starting with this guy, he gets to put an influence out first, so he'll probably put that on the capo. Now we come to this player. Maybe he wants to, he'll put one on the counselor here. Then this player gets to put one. Maybe he wants to put one on the capo as well. Try to get him to be the capo. Now when 2 players have an equal number of influence on a gangster, the tiebreaker is decided by whoever is the capo. So since this player is currently the capo, he's going to, of course, rule in favor of himself and keep the capo ring, saying he's got most influence at this time. But anyway, we got to put 2 more. Each player has to put 2 more influence out. I'll do that off camera. This player, the Fiduciani player, was placing his second influence. He put it on the capo, so now he takes the capo ring as he has more influence than the other player did, so he now takes the capo ring, so he's got it. Alright, so we went around, each player placing 1 influence. I'm going clockwise until each player had placed 3 influence. When we ended up, the Fiduciani player ended up with more influence on the capo, so now he has the capo ring and he'll be first in the next phase. All the other players have put their influence tokens out, so we have finished that portion of setup. And that actually completes setup, so we're all ready to go, and now we'll get started with how to play. Alright, so the game is played over phases, which you can see here on this phase track. First phase is the commission, and you pretty much do what it says, play influence cards. So starting with the first player, which is the player who has the capo ring, they will look at their influence cards and choose one to play. And basically what this is going to let you do is place influence on gangsters. So when you play an influence card, you basically just do what it says. For instance, this one says place 3 influence on a hitman. There's also a little icon that shows that there's 3 influence on a hitman, which is that icon. So you take from your supply 3 influence, and you're limited to your supply. If you ever run out of your influence tokens, you're just out. So you would place 3 influence on a hitman, so any one of these gangsters that's out that has the hitman icon, so that could be any of those, or so maybe he wants to put him on this guy. And then this one says, and must allow one other player to place 1 influence on a gangster. So this player would choose one of these other players, and that player would be allowed to place 1 influence on any gangster. For example, this guy Maybe he puts it there. You may have an influence card that says or, so you could either place 2 influence on a gambler, which is a gangster with this icon, or instead of doing that, you could swap positions of any 2 gangsters in the same row. So, you could swap this person and this person into the different spots. Move this one there and this one there. So basically, when you're playing an influence card, you're just doing exactly what it says on the card. So in the commission phase, the first player starts by playing 1. When you play it, you just put it into the used influence discard spot and place the influence how it says, or do whatever it says. Then in clockwise order, the next player gets to play an influence card, and the next player gets to play an influence card. Once you've done 1 round of everybody playing an influence card, when it gets back to the next player, who was the first player, they then get to play another influence card, but they can do what's called the ante, and then they can choose an amount, like if this came back around to the first player and he was going to play his second influence card, he can say, I'm going to make the ante $3. So he'll put $3 into the pot, get 2 ones back, and play his card. Now the next player has to pay at least $3 to play an influence card, and he can go ahead and up the ante. Maybe this player says, okay, and he pays he's going to up the ante to $4, and then he play his influence card, and the next player, then when he wants to play an influence card, he has to pay at least $4, and if he wants to up the ante to make it higher, he can do so. So players will continue to do that until they either don't have an influence card they want to play, or don't want to pay the cost if somebody's upped the ante to play a card, or for whatever reason they can't or don't want to play another influence card, they pass. Once all players have passed, the commission phase ends. And just like during setup, when we were placing influence, if at any time during the commission phase, when players are placing influence with their influence cards, if a new player has more influence than the current capo, then they would take the capo ring and they would become the capo. Again, if the change of capo takes place during a phase, the player order remains the same, but the player that has the capo ring, the new player that takes the capo ring, has the power of breaking ties, for instance, with who has the most influence on the capo if it's a tie or whatever. So that power transfers immediately, but the player order doesn't transfer till the beginning of the next phase. You can, when you're in the commission phase and playing influence cards, you can place influence on associates if you want to, but during the next phase, the crew, when you're gaining respect and money, the associates will not gain you anything. You could just be putting influence on them for, betting on their future. So in any case, after all players have played their influence cards and passed and gotten to the point where they decided to pass, that ends the commission phase, and then you'll move the checkbox down to the next phase, which is the crew. In the crew, you'll start with the capo and work your way down in order 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and pay out respect and money to the controlling player. So for instance here, this player, the Fiduciani and the Minuetti player, whatever, both have 2 influence, but because the capo is the Fiduciani player, he says he gives him control. So he would gain 7 respect. You get what's on the card plus the bonus that's next to it on the board, so 3 plus 4. So he would get 7 respect, and then he would also gain $7. So he would take $7 from the bank. 5, 6, 7, like so. And then you just go down in order, reverse order. So starting with 9, then 8. The controlling player here is De La Rosa. He's the only one with influence, so he would get 4 respect and 7 money. And then 7 money, and so forth. So you would just go down. This person, the De La Rosa, he would get 3 times 2, so 6 respect, and 3 plus 3, 6 money. This player, the Minueto, is he's the only one. He would get minus 1 plus 2, so just 1 respect and 7 money, and so forth down through the third guy. So once you've finished going from the top to the bottom, generating money and respect, then you'll go in reverse order, starting from the bottom, the third guy, then second guy, first guy, going back up, and you'll take the controlling player will get to take an action with that gangster. They can take an action that is on the board, like this one has pay $10 to whack a gangster, or some gangsters may have an action on their card. For instance, this one, add 2 influence to any gangster on the same level or lower. So when it got to this space, the racketeer, the player controlling this, could either take the action on the board or take the action on the card. And you have another option, which is to make a move, in which case you're trying to move yourself up in the mob hierarchy. And you can do that by the following steps. So let's go over how you would make a move. So if for a controlling player's action they wanted to try to make a move to move up in the organization, they have to make a move against one of the gangsters that their arrow points to. So for instance, this player, the third guy, can make a move here against the second guy, or they could make a move here against the racketeer. So we'll say this player, the third guy, he wants to make a move against the racketeer. So the player controlling the player that's making a move would take this black move die and roll it. So in this case he rolled a 2. He then adds that against his respect value printed on his card, not including the board modifier, so 2 plus 2 is 4. If that number is higher than the position he's attempting to move into, so in this case position 5, if his total was higher, then he would be successful. But here in this case he got a 4, so he's not successful. That's lower than this position he was trying to move into, a 5. Since he failed, as a result of failing, the player that controls that player that tried to make a move and failed would lose 4 respect. So he would go 1, 2, 3. He would lose 4 respect, and then a neutral influence marker is placed on that gangster that attempted to make the move. Now, neutral influence markers are placed by various things, like attempting to make a move, some influence cards, or just various game effects may allow you to place neutral influence. They work just like other influence, only nobody controls them. So if the most influence on a gangster is neutral, or even tied for the most influence on a gangster is neutral, then nobody controls that gangster. And even the capo cannot break a tie if the neutral influence is tied for the most. That just, if neutral influence is tied for the most or has the most, then nobody controls that gangster. And as I said, even the capo can't break a tie in favor of anybody else. But let's say this guy had rolled a 4, so he got a total of 4 plus 2 is 6, which is higher than the position he was trying to move into, so he's successful in making a move. If that was the case, then the player making the move and the player he made a move on swap positions in the hierarchy, the organization's hierarchy. You then turn both gangsters sideways to indicate that they cannot take any further actions during this crew phase. So, for example, this guy was resolving his action, which was to make a move. When it gets back up to, and you'll resolve this next, this next, this next. When you get to him, he's turned sideways. He won't get to take an additional action now. But in addition, the player that successfully made the move instead of losing 4 respect actually gains 4 respect. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And the player who controlled the gangster that the move was made against and lost, they actually will lose 4 respect. So in this case, the Minueto family player would lose 4 respect, but he's at 0, so he can't go any lower than that anyway. But if he had been up here, he would lose 4 respect. And then still 1 neutral influence marker is placed on the successful gangster that made the move. A couple of other results that are on the making a move die. If you roll the knife, that's an automatic failure. And what happens is basically that guy was, if he rolled the knife, he's caught and killed. So his influence marker is returned to the player. The gangster that rolled the knife trying to make a move is killed, so he goes into the sleeping with the fishes space. That player also loses 4 respect. One other result on the make a move die is the ring. If you roll that, it's an automatic success, so you just automatically succeed at making a move. And then you just continue on resolving with the next gangster. So you'll do that for each gangster going up. Again, you can either, the controlling gangster, the controller of that gangster can either do the board space action, or if their gangster has a action on their card, they can choose to do the board space action or the gangster or the action on their card, or they can attempt to make a move. Now, one of the actions here, like the action here for this third guy, and some gangster cards may have the action where you can whack a gangster. So in this case, if this guy chose to do this action, pay $10 to whack a gangster. If he had $10, he would have, well, you have to have it in order to do that action. So you'd pay $10 to the supply, and then choose a gangster you're going to whack. You choose any gangster on the board. Right, the controlling player of the gangster who's trying to whack, after they chose a target they're trying to whack, they roll the whack dice. If they get an X like that, they fail and they lose 4 respect. If they roll any gun or capo ring, then they're successful. And if they're successful, for instance, if this was the target, this guy was, well, we'll say, I'll say this was the target. He's trying to whack this guy. He rolls the guns. He's successful. So any influence marker on that gangster go back to the player whose it was. That gangster is moved to the sleeping with the fishes. The player that controlled the gangster that got whacked loses 4 respect, and the player that did the whacking gains 4 respect. If no player controlled the the gangster that got whacked, then nobody loses any respect. And same with making a move. If no player controlled the gangster that was made a move on, successfully made a move on, then nobody loses respect in that case. And similar to the making a move, if a player is attempting to whack another gangster and they roll the knife, then their gangster is killed instead. They remove them from the board, return their influence markers, and their gangster goes to the sleeping with the fishes, and they lose 4 respect. If you were trying to whack the capo, if you were taking this action and you try to whack the capo, that cost not only the $10 for that action, but it costs an additional $10. So at any time for any action you have that you're trying to whack the capo, whatever the cost for the action is, you have to pay an additional $10 on top of the action cost to try to whack the capo. If you try to make a move or whack a gangster whose reputation is negative like this player, or 0 like this player, then whether you're successful or fail, no player gains or loses respect in that case. So if you're successful, you wouldn't gain respect. If the other player would not lose respect. In either case, if the respect value of the gangster you're making a move against or trying to whack is 0 or less, neither of the players will gain or lose respect. Now you may still, if you're making a move, you still get to swap spots, or if you're whacking them, they still will go to sleeping with the fishes if you're successful, but no player would gain or lose respect in that case. If a player takes this action, cancel an action, if they control this gangster and they take the action to cancel an action, they take one of these Merta coins and they place it on one of the other gangsters. And then when it comes time to resolve that gangster's action, the player that controls that just is unable to take the action. So they're basically skipped, and then the coin is removed. This action just allows you to remove 1 influence marker from any gangster on the board. This one allows you to steal steal $3 from another player. If the player you choose to steal from has less than $3, then they just have to give you all they have. You can't steal from the bank when you do that. This one just lets you switch 2 influence markers from 2 different gangsters, so maybe you could switch this one here and this one here, something like that. This action just allows you to place one of your influence markers on any gangster. This one allows you to add 3 neutral influence. You can add them all to one gangster, or you can put 1 on 3 different gangsters, or 2 on one and 1 on the other, however you want to do that. And we already talked about how neutral influence work. This one just lets you draw 1 influence card, and then the capo, they have no action to take, board action to take, other than if you control the capo, you have the capo ring. So again, starting with the 3rd guy and then going up, each player will take an action. Each controlling player for that will take either the board action. If their gangster has an action on their card, they could take that, or they can make a move, or you can just pass. One thing we haven't talked about yet is the blackmail coins. Some influence cards allow you to place a blackmail. For example, this card lets you place 1 influence token on the first guy and place 1 blackmail token underneath your influence token. So you take a blackmail token, your influence token, and it says to put it on first guy. So that's right here. Now when it came to the controlling player of the first guy's turn to perform an action, even though this player, the Fiduci Ani player, has 3 influence there, and this guy only has 1. Now the blackmail token does not count as an influence token, so the De La Rosa player still only has 1 influence. So the Fiduci Ani player controls this player and would be able to take an action, but since the De La Rosa player has a blackmail token on there, the Fiduci Ani player can only perform an action with the permission of the De La Rosa player, since he's got a blackmail coin on there. So the only way the Fiduci Ani player can take an action with that player is if the De La Rosa player agrees with what he's going to do. So they can negotiate. He can say he could tell him he can take an action of removing an influence marker from another player, or make a move against another player, or maybe even pay him some money. So they'll do some negotiation, but if they can't come to an agreement, then the Fiduci Ani player has to pass and not take an action with that player. And there's some influence cards and so forth that will maybe allow you to remove an influence marker. If an influence marker is ever removed, or remove a blackmail token, but if influence marker is ever removed from the top of a blackmail token, then the blackmail token is also removed. And a gangster can only have 1 blackmail token on them at a time, so another player couldn't come and put another blackmail token here on this guy. Alright, so we again would resolve starting from the bottom, going up. Each gangster that's controlled by somebody would perform some action. Once all that's done, then you finish the crew phase and you go to the fence phase. In the fence phase, that's pretty simple. You draw influence card depending on the number of gangsters you control here in the organization chart. So if you control 2 or more gangsters, you just get to draw 2 influence cards. If you control 1 gangster, you can draw 3, and if you control 0, you draw 4. In addition, you can buy cards, additional influence cards, for $10 each. When you're determining control during the fence phase, when you're determining control of gangsters, if there's a tie, in this phase, ties are not broken by the capo. So if there's a tie for most influence on a gangster during the fence phase, then nobody controls that gangster. Again, it's not broken by the capo during this phase. And of course, we start the fence phase with the capo player and then go in clockwise order. Once everybody's had their turn to draw influence cards and buy cards, then we finish that phase and go to the feds phase. Alright, in the feds phase, you check each gangster starting with the capo and then going down to see if they've attracted the attention of the government. If they have a number of influence, depending on the number of players, so in a 3-players game, 9 influence. If a gangster has 9 influence or more on them, then they're removed and sent to prison, and the influence tokens on them just go back to their players, and then you go to the next player down, and the same. So in a 3-player game, each gangster is checked, and if they have 9 or more influence, they're sent to prison. If they have less than 9 influence, then they remain where they are. And you can see that changes for the number of players. In a 4-player game, it's 10 influence. And in a 5-player game, it's 11 influence. Once all the gangsters are checked that manner in the feds phase, and whichever ones need to go to prison or sent, you go on down to the family phase. Oh, I forgot one thing in the feds phase. Any players that were turned sideways because of making a move that remain on the board after you've checked if they need to be arrested and sent to prison. Any that are on the board and still remain sideways from having made a move earlier, they are then rotated back face up. Then you move on to the family phase. Alright, when you get to the family phase, that's when you'll feel empty positions from players maybe having been whacked and sent to sleep with the fishes, or sent to prison. During the feds phase, you'll have empty spots on your board, and during the family phase is when you'll fill those. If the capo space is empty, then the highest ranked gangster still on the board moves into the capo space, and the player controlling that gangster now takes the capo ring. So in this case, that would be the De La Rosa player, so he would take the capo ring from the Fiduciani player, and he would now be the capo. Then you go to the next space down that needs to be filled, and you'll fill these in descending order. So next you'd start with the underboss, which that one needs to be filled, and you'll fill it from somebody that's lower in the organization that's directly connected by an arrow. Now in this case there's two possibilities, the counselor and the racketeer. They're both directly connected by arrows. So there's if there was only one, like if this guy was over here and there's only one option, then you would just move him in and he would then fill that spot, and then you'd have to fill the counselor spot. If there's more than one possibility of who can fill it, like here, because they're both directly connected with arrows, then you look here and it says it's appointed by the capo. So the player controlling the capo then decides which of these two he wants to fill that spot. So maybe since this guy's controlled by somebody else and this guy isn't controlled by anybody, the capo may then decide he's going to put that player in the underboss spot. If the next spot to be filled was the counselor, and there's no gangsters that are connected to that spot, then you fill it with one of the other gangsters that is still in lower position. And again, if that could be any of these guys, and again you look here to see who that's appointed by. This one would be appointed by the capo, so he could choose any of the gangsters here on the board to fill that spot. If there were no lower ranked gangsters, like all these gangsters were in prison or sleeping with the fishes, then you would choose an associate. The capo would choose one of the associates to fill that spot. And if for some rare reason there were no associates, you would draw the top gangster card to fill the spot. Once all the spots are filled, any empty associate spots are then just filled by drawing cards from the gangster deck. Once you're finished with that, you move the check mark down to the bookkeeping box. That pretty much ends the round. You'll then place a new check box up in the commission phase and start a new phase playing influence card, new commission phase playing influence cards, starting with whoever's the capo. So that's how you'll continue to play like that all through the phases until you finished your fifth phase. You moved your fifth check mark box into the bookkeeping box. When you move the fifth check mark into the bookkeeping box, then all players will gain respect one final time, just like they do in the crew phase. You won't gain money. You only go through each of the gangsters and the controlling player gains respect for each of their gangsters. Players will then sell any influence cards they still have in their possession for $8. And one thing to mention, you can at any time sell one of your influence cards for $8. So you can do that at any time, but at the end of the game, any influence cards you still have after you've collected respect for the final time, you sell all your remaining cards for $8. Then for every $10 that you have in your possession, you gain one respect. For anything left over like if you had 35, and so you'd turn in three, $10 for three respect, and the other five you would just keep. After that's done, whichever player has the most respect is the winner. If there is a tie for most respect, then amongst the two tied players, if one of them has the capo ring, then that player is the winner. If neither of the tied players for most respect has the capo ring, then whichever one of them has the highest ranked gangster controlled, then they would be the winner. If neither player controls any active gangsters on the board, then whichever one of them has the most money would be the winner. If by some miracle you've gotten past that and they're tied for money, then whichever one of them has the most influence markers on the board would be the winner. If that's still a tie, players would roll this die. The tied players would roll this die, and whichever rolled the highest amount would be the winner. And if they both rolled the same and there was still the tie, then the rules say whichever player can climb to the roof and throw the game off the roof would be the winner. So anyway, it'll never get that far down. So that's how you play. Let me see if there's a few things I haven't covered. Oh, here's one thing I haven't covered. Whenever you're rolling dice to make a move or whack a player or whatever, you can always pay $10 to re-roll the die. You can do that at any time. You can also pay $10 to make another player re-roll a die. So if they are like rolling to make a move on one of your gangsters and they're successful, you can pay $10 and make them re-roll. And then they can decide to pay, and if they fail, then they can decide to pay $10 and re-roll again. So you can continue doing that, paying $10 to re-roll yourself or force someone else to re-roll as long as you have the money to do so. I've mentioned you can pay $8 at any time to sell, or sell one of your influence cards at any time for $8. It's just a reminder that if you're trying to whack the capo, it costs an extra $10. That's just a reminder that a neutral influence is added to any gangster who attempts to make a move. Some cards may give you a reroll token, which you can spend to reroll the dice without spending $10. Of course, you're encouraged to try to negotiate things all throughout the game. You can trade money, you can trade influence cards. You can trade promises and threats. You can't trade respect, and you can't trade your influence markers. All right, I think that's about covers it. I'll set it back up, hopefully as close as I can to how it was right after I did the setup part of the video, and we'll go through a few example turns. All right, I believe I got everybody set back to how they should be at the beginning. Right after setup, the Fiduciani player is the capo, so he'll go first. We're in the commission phase where we play influence cards, so he's going to look at his influence cards and decide one to play. So he's got this one where he can place 2 influence on a gambler or swap positions of any 2 gangsters in the same row. I think he's going to put 2 influence on a gambler, so he'll take these 2. Here's a gambler here, the underboss, so he'll put 2 influence on there. And then this goes into the used influence cards. Alright, now we come on over here to the Minuetto player. Alright, he's looked at his cards. I think he's going to play this one, place 2 influence on second guy and 2 influence on a gambler. So he's going to take 2 of his influence, put it on second guy, and 2 influence on a gambler, and I think he's going to put that over here on third guy. Alright, this card gets discarded, and now we come over here to the De La Rosa family. I think he's going to play this one, place 3 influence on a hitman. He could, it has this little power where he could pay $5 to the bank, and instead of playing it now, he could play it during the crew phase which is the next phase. But I think he's just going to go ahead and play it now. He's going to put 3 influence on a hitman. The capo is all of the con man, gambler, hitman, and thug. He's going to put 3 influence on the capo, and that's going to give, Lord. Alright, that's going to give him the most influence, so now he's going to take the capo ring. And then this card that he played gets discarded. And now we're back to the Fiduciani family. And I think he's going to play this one, place 2 influence on any gangster. It also has the power where they could pay $5 to the bank to play it during the crew phase instead. But they're going to go ahead and play it now. I mean, that may be a good idea to do that, but this person's only got $5. Now remember also, because we've come back around full circle, this player could now up the ante and pay an amount of money to play this card, and then other players would also have to pay that same amount of money or more if they wanted to up the ante. But with only $5, I don't think we're going to do that. So the Fiduciani player is just going to put 2 influence on any gangster. I think they're going to put that on the bean counter here. Alright, now this card gets discarded. Alright, we're back over here to the Minuetto family. Now they could also, when they're playing one of their cards, even though that player didn't up the ante to play a card, this player can. So we'll just say they're going to do that. They're going to say they're going to ante $2. Let me get them a change of $3. So that's cost $2 to play a card. He's got this one, place 2 influence on a thug and 3 neutral influence, and place 3 neutral influence on the board, maybe split between the gangsters. But the only thugs out are this one, and this guy's got a -1 reputation, this guy's got a 0 reputation. So he's not really too interested in those. I mean, he could put it on the capo, but that's not going to give him enough to take the capo ring. I think he's going to do this one, place 3 influence on a gambler. Again, it has that pay $5 to do it during the crew phase, but since he did an ante of $2, he's only got $3, so that's not even possible for him. So he's going to take 3 of his influence, put it on a gambler, so he's going to put it here on the underboss. Alright, this card gets discarded. Now we're back here to De La Rosa. They'll have to pay at least $2 to play a card, since that's the current ante. They could increase it if they wanted to. Alright, so he's going to play this one, place 3 influence on any gangster. So they'll take 3 influence. I think they're going to put that on... who are they going to put that on? We'll say the Racketeer. But it also says, and allow 1 other player to place 2 influence on any gangster. So I guess I'll allow the Minuetto family to place 2 influence on any gangster. And we'll just say they're going to choose to put it on the counselor up here. Alright, now I have to pay the ante, and I'm going to go ahead and up it by 1. So I'm going to pay 3. So I get 2 change, and the ante is now 3. So if the next player wants to play a card, it'll cost them 3 money. And this now gets discarded. Alright, we're back to the Fiduciani family. He's got to pay at least 3 to play a card. We'll say he's going to do this one, place 2 influence on a con man and 2 influence on a thug. So he's going to put 2 on the capo, since he's, all of them. Then he can also put 2 influence on a thug, and I'm assuming, since the capo is also a thug, he can place it there as well. And that's going to give him more influence, so now he'll take the capo ring. And he's got to pay 3 for doing that for the ante, so he'll get 2 back. Right, then this card gets discarded. And now we come back to the Minuetto player. He's only got $3, which he would have to pay to play a card. I think he's going to pass. Back to the De La Rosa player. He's only got $2, so he couldn't play a card, so he's going to pass. And the Fiduciani player is in the same boat. They've only got $2 left, so they don't have enough to meet the ante, so they can't play a card, so they pass as well. So that's going to end the commission. So now we move the checkbox down to the crew phase. So now we determine respect and money by the controlling players, starting with the capo and working our way down. Fiduciani players controlling the capo, so they'll get 3 + 4 = 7 respect, and 3 + 4 = 7 money. So 7 respect, and 5, 6, 7 bucks. Alright, now we come to the underboss. The Minuetto player controls the underboss, so they'll get 4 respect and 7 money. 4 respect and 7 money. Alright, next one is the counselor. It looks like the Minuetto player controls that one as well, so they'll get 3 × 2 = 6 respect and 6 money. So that puts them at 10 respect. And I've given them another $6. Alright, nobody controls the enforcer, so nobody gets respect or money for that. The De La Rosa player controls the racketeer, so he'll get 4 respect and 2 money. 4. And $2 for the De La Rosa player. Alright, the Fiduciani player controls the bean counter. That's going to give them 4 respect and 6 money. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And $6. Nobody controls first guy. The Minuetto family controls the second guy, so they'll get 4 respect and $2. And finally, the third guy is also controlled by the Minuetto family, so they'll get 3 respect. 1, 2, 3, and $4. Alright, so it looks like the Familia Minuetto is doing the better than the other players after the first half of the crew phase. We didn't really have to break any ties or anything with the capo ring this time. Now we do the second part of the crew phase, where we go starting with the third guy and work our way up to the top, doing actions, either action on the board, action on the card, or making a move. Alright, Familia Minuetto controls the third guy. I think they are going to pay $10 to whack a gangster. So there's their $10. They're going to pay that. And I think they are going to try to whack the racketeer. So we roll the dice. And unfortunately, failure. So now that player has to lose 4 respect. That was a pitiful roll. 1 X on the dice, 1. And almost all successes except for the X and the knife. Pitiful. Alright, so that's the action for the third guy. We come to the second guy. Minuetto family also controls them. So they can cancel an action or try to make a move. I think they will they're going to try to make a move on the first guy. So remember, they can make a move on anyone that they have arrow pointing to, so they can make a move on first guy or the enforcer. I think they would have to roll. Well, they have a good chance of actually, with a respect of 4, they have a good chance of being successful making a move on the enforcer. I think that's who they're going to make a move on. Alright, so we're going to roll the die. We got a ring, that's an automatic success. So they will swap places. They successfully make a move. Now, because they made a move on somebody that had negative respect, they don't gain anything. They don't gain the 4 respect that they normally would if the person had positive respect. We do have to turn both of them sideways and put a neutral influence on the successful player that made a move. Alright, we come to the first guy, nobody controls him, so there'll be no action there. We come to the bean counter, Fiduciani controls that player, so they can steal $3 or they can attempt to make a move. I think they're going to attempt to make a move against the racketeer. It just has better bonus +2 and +1 instead of +1. Well, the ×2 is good for getting money. So, no, maybe they'll just stay there and they'll steal $3 from the Minuetto family. So, they'll take this 5 and give them 2 back. Alright, move on to the racketeer. De La Rosa controls them. So they can either add 2 influence to any gangster on the same level or lower, so there, or they can switch 2 influence markers. Or they could attempt to make a move, or they could eat a cannoli and do nothing. I think they're going to switch 2 influence markers, so they're going to move one of their De La Rosa markers from up here and move this Minuetto family influence marker there. So that's going to be their action. This player did the move, so they're turned sideways, so they don't get to take an action. Now we come to the counselor. Now, because of that move they did of swapping the influence, they control this character. So now they can either attempt to make a move or add 3 neutral influence or do nothing and, pass. I think they're going to add 3 neutral influence and they'll add it here, which, because then that'll make it tied with the Minuetto family. Nobody will get to take an action there because nobody will control it. So that nobody controls that, and then the only action for the capo is the person controlling the capo has the ring, so no action to take there. So that's going to finish the crew phase. Now we move on down to the fence. So we draw influence cards based on the number of gangsters we control. So we start with the capo with Fiduciani family. They control this one. They control 1, 2. They control 2. So if we look here, if you control 2 gangsters, you just get 2 cards. So they get to draw 1, 2. Alright, next we move to the Minuetto family. They don't control that one. They don't control that because they're tied with neutral. They don't control that. They do control this one, so they control 1. They don't control that. They do control this one, so they control 2. So they only get 2 cards as well. Alright, now the De La Rosa family. They control 1, 2, so they're only going to get 2 cards as well. Now, each player could have paid $10 to buy an extra card, but nobody wanted to do that. The only one that really could have done that is the Fiduciani family, but they didn't want to do that. But again, when you're collecting your cards, you have the option to also pay $10 per extra influence card that you want to buy. So they would have the option to do that now. After each player has drawn their cards for what they control, then they have the option in turn order again to pay $10 for each additional card they want to buy. But as I said, nobody wants to do that. So we're finished with the fence phase. Now we go on down to the feds phase. So since we have 3 players, anyone with more than 9 influence is arrested. The capo here has 11 influence on them, so they're going to be arrested. So all these tokens are returned to their players. The capo goes to prison. None of the other players have 9 influence markers. The underboss has 8, so they're pretty close, but nobody else is even close at this point. So that's the only position that's going to go to the prison. Now we rotate gangsters. Any that were rotated, put them back, and that's going to finish the feds phase. Now we go to the family phase. The only position, or the first position that's going to need to be filled by the capo, that's filled by the next highest ranking position underneath. So that's going to be the underboss. Is going to move up and become the capo. That's controlled by nobody. When the capo is controlled by nobody, then the last player to have the capo ring just retains it until somebody does gain control of the capo. So next, now we have to fill the underboss, but there's several positions that are connected to that are lower. So the capo then decides which of those players is going to fill the underboss position. The capo is still the fiduciani player. He doesn't really like that any of those players, because none of them are controlled by him, but he chooses the counselor, so the counselor is going to move in there. All right, that now leaves the counselor spot open, so it can be filled by the racketeer or the bean counter. The capo gets to decide which one of those players takes that spot, and the fiduciani player, since he controls the bean counter, he's going to move him up to be the counselor. All right, so now we have to fill the bean counter spot, and there is looks like only the one of the associates is connected to that spot. If we look at the arrows, the only one connected from lower is the 3 associates, and looks like if there's more than one that can move there, it's appointed by the counselor. The counselor is the fiduciani player, so they get to decide which one of these. So they'll decide old Snack Daddy de Arjucio will move up into the bean counter spot. Alright, and finally the only thing left to be filled is an associate spot, which is just filled from the gangster deck. And that completes the family phase. We move this check marks down into the bookkeeping, put another one back on the commission, and now we would start a new round. So that pretty much, I think it shows you, I think we've done enough examples of how the game plays. We did one of attempting a whack. We did a turn making a move. We've played influence cards. We've done a whole round, so I think that about covers it. So the first time I played this game, which was quite a long while ago, it just didn't really grab me, and so I hadn't played it again for a while. When I pulled it out the other day and set it up to play and relearn the rules so I could do this video, I actually liked it a lot more. I guess maybe I grasped it better or something, I'm not sure, but I can see where this would be a lot of fun if you're playing with the right group of people and doing a lot of, like, just playing, through here single player. There's not really any negotiation and stuff that can really be done, but I can see a lot of smack talk and negotiation, and take that, and I think, I just think this would be a pretty fun game, playing it with other players, not just playing it solo. So I'm looking forward to doing that. So I did enjoy this. Now the new revision of this that I guess Tom Vassell was one of the co-designers of this one. I don't think his name is on the new version, so I don't know what's changed or what's different with it. But it may be pretty close to this one. But this version, I think it's pretty fun. I look forward to playing it again with some friends of mine. But I better wrap this up. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.